Okay, so for our assessment, our grade level expectation was to identify works of art from the United States, including like subcategories of Native American art, painting, sculpture, and architecture.
So we started off our test or quiz with the multiple choice questions. Overall, our students did decent on this part. One of the most common missed ones was over an immigrant painter of the 17th century, who happened to be John Smibert, but lots of people got that one wrong. So I think looking back, we just need to discuss like American painters a little more in the future.
Yeah, and just to piggyback off that a little bit, a lot of my tests, like of my five, also missed the question about like landscape paintings. So just I think different from that same century. So like just kind of different painting types as well.
So trying to figure out what genres of paintings there are.
Yeah.
And how to like differentiate them.
And then we did true or false section next. Our true or false section kind of hit three different areas of the art. We had it talk about landscape paintings again, a different type of American art, which was modernism architecture, and then the Statue of Liberty, which also kind of fell in the architecture category. And the true or false section was kind of rough. Most people actually got the painting question correct on the true or false one, but then they would miss the question about the Statue of Liberty, whether or not it was a sculptural work. And postmodernism architecture kind of threw everybody off a little bit. So true or false didn't have the best turnout. Once again, I think just kind of reviewing some more of that material and maybe figuring out a better way to go about teaching architecture, because those were the true or false questions that got missed the most.
Mm-hmm. So then next we had the matching, and for this we kind of did different forms of art, such as still lifes or portraits. We also did different types of work made by different people. So we have pop art made by Andy Warhol, and overall, most of the quizzes are decent. Ones that got missed the most would probably be the confusion between the tribal artwork and then the still life artwork. People kept flipping those two around.
And kind of like you said with the multiple choice, I think tribal art, we might just need to hit back on that a couple times.
Yeah, I agree.
Then we have fill in the blank. Luckily, they got the tribal art one right in the fill in the blank spot. But the thing that really threw everybody else off, the other two fill in the blanks were about different forms of art, and that threw everybody off a lot. I didn't really have anybody in my five tests get all three fill in the blanks right. No one really knew what minimal art was.
Yeah, and I think we kind of threw them off when we said a purist form of abstract art, blah, blah, blah.
I think part of the problem with the fill in the blanks was our fake answers were too believable.
Yeah.
And kind of like, especially if, students weren't sure of what they were being tested over or the specific content, like that's going to throw them off. So when developing our questions, just overall, making sure our fake answers aren't too believable, I think.
Yeah, I think our word bank needs to be fixed a little bit, but otherwise I think it was okay.
Yeah.
All right, so then next we had our short answer questions, and these were kind of a hit or miss depending on the student. Some got the tribal art correct, like answering forms of tribal art such as face painting, block painting, etc. But the rest of them, a lot of people did not know. I think 16, our question over like different characteristics of impressionistic paintings was missed by everybody.
Yeah.
So I think we need to go back and kind of teach what that is.
And I really don't think that one's a problem of wording on our part. Because we said describe characteristics of like a landscape painting. So like obviously landscapes are going to have landscapes in them. And that's what a lot of like answers I got were. But we meant more like how is it made? What does it look like? Like what are the brush strokes sort of thing? And I had one person get that out of 10. So and then moving on to the extended response, this was probably our worst turnout of answers overall. People who did answer it still, for the most part, got the difference between sculptural art and architectural art, but they didn't really explain their thinking further than that, which was really what we were asking them to do. Plus, I think overall when we did draft the test, most of it focuses on like paintings and kind of different art forms. We didn't really touch on sculptural or architectural art much in the test, so maybe just kind of going over that more in the classroom, making sure they understand that side of the GLE just as much as they understand the other sides, I think could help that. Because when looking at an overall range of scores, our highest scoring test was like 70%. Our lowest was about 20. So when we set our proficiency rate at a 70%, only one test was proficient. And that means like we only had about 10% of our students actually passing at a proficient level.
So that other 90% we need to make sure they understand what we're testing over, and if that involves working with them one-on-one, then we can do that.
Yeah, and then when we kind of went back over everything, looking at our strengths and obstacles, overall it's going to help us kind of develop some SMART goals.
So our strengths, we had a couple. I think one of our strengths was being able to answer questions over the topics of painting. I believe lots of people had a history that because they were able to answer kind of different questions about what this painting is, what's it like, and those kind of things. And then our few questions where we had tribal art, we also had students who had an understanding of the characteristics of tribal art. They were able to identify that real well, I think.
Yeah, those were, I mean, even though they were kind of a hit or a miss, the students who did know it, like, knew it really well.
Yeah.
So that one's kind of more assessing individual performance. And then our obstacles were more kind of, differentiating different types of art forms. Once again, the architecture portion was kind of our weakest area. A little bit of identifying American artists, though that wasn't part of the GLE. I mean, when you're talking about American art, it's good to know who made it. And then just critical thinking overall, because our short answer and extended response just didn't have the best turnout of questions. And so
we had a lot of people just like with one word answers and the extended answer part of it.
And so we've kind of developed 2 SMART goals to fix this problem. The first one that we kind of talked about was the differentiating different art forms and types, because we had about 20% of students really succeeded that. So we want to raise that to at least like a 55% by the end of the semester, and we could do that easily through like just some research projects, just weekly or bi-weekly research, finding an artist every week and giving some sort of presentation on them, writing a paper, just something to kind of boost their knowledge of artists overall.
Yeah, I agree. And then our second SMART goal was over critical thinking on the short and extended responded questions. And that was at a 20% as well, but we'd kind of like to raise that to at least an 85 by the end of the school year though. And a good way to do this is just having them like do artwork reflection essays, probably about every week, maybe on a Friday after they get done with the unit or a project, and just reflect on that type of artwork, what they use to make that, and give them like that knowledge that they need to know about that artwork.
Because once again, those extended response questions and even the short answer ones, we were kind of, I mean, art's still a rather subjective like subject anyway, so we were really asking more for like what they thought of certain things. Sure, we had like a couple clear-cut answers, like what's the name of this painting, but like overall it was still like, what do you see this kind of art as? And we just didn't get a lot of response on that. And then just a couple other things we thought about trying would be a multitude of like different little maybe fun projects or things to get them more engaged. We talked about like creating a project where the student has to like become the artist to work more with that idea of knowing artists, and like they'd research a famous artist and then kind of dress up as them maybe to give a presentation, some sort of visual presentation along with like an artwork they made based on that artist's style. So it's a good way to like get them engaged other than like the weekly research, to just kind of try something new and still be creating.
Yeah, we also thought of maybe conducting a field trip to a local art museum and then providing students with a questionnaire sheet to have them fill out during their tour, and then make them really like think deeply about what they're looking at.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, overall just, kind of making maybe some review games to get them more active with terminology, because even back to the fill in the blanks, like just our terminology was kind of lacking a little bit, and it's going to be really hard for them to understand the material if they don't know the terms, if they don't know the basics. So even just going back and hitting some of those basics a bit harder would be good, just to make sure everyone knows where we're starting at, so we can actually figure out some sort of place to go. yeah, otherwise, the tests, they kind of did disappoint me a little bit.
But I would agree that art history is a harder subject to
It
learn,
is. And it's not entirely all them too. I mean, maybe it's the way we drafted it. We did, like you said, a while back, kind of jumped around. We didn't really stay consecutive with like certain subjects in certain areas, which could have also thrown them off too. I think even drafting the test, we kind of focused more on like certain areas, so making sure we give all areas of the GLE the proper attention that they need would be very beneficial. I cannot talk today, but I think that is all what we need to cover.